the gap, standing for Jesus, standing in the gap for family and friends, standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in.
Everything's in context. You know what you're looking at. But the other thing that we try to do is keep you current on current events, because God put us in this world, and now we have to deal in this world, no matter how evil this world can be and all that kind of thing. But you need to know what's going on in this world so that you can live your life in the way Micah 6:8 tells you, informs you to do. And we call this part of our study, of our ministry, Gap News. And Gap News brings something out of headlines right up to you in this study. And Marvel is the one that handles that. I'm not sure what she's got going on, but she always has something good going on. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sweetie.
Y'all, I'm back. And I got a good Gap News for you this time. Of course, you know, again, so many things are happening every week. Every week there's so much going on. But we've had some interesting things happening with ballots in Colorado and in Maine. And to be honest, in other states. And I'm calling this one Trump dumped off the ballot.
And then there were two states where the disgraced, twice impeached, 4 times indicted ex-president has been kicked off the ballot, or at least kicked off the ballot pending appeal. More proof that Donald J. Trump is having a hard time shaking the I word, insurrection. And that the Republican frontrunner is heading into the new year with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment nipping at his heels. First, there was Colorado. Now it's Maine saying that Trump is disqualified from being on the ballot. And let's not forget that more than a dozen other states with the 14th Amendment have cases pending. 14th Amendment cases. Now, this new ruling from Maine Secretary of State is as fiery as it is somber. Quote, I conclude, as did the Colorado Supreme Court, that the record establishes that Mr. Trump, over the course of several months and culminating on January 6, 2021, used a false narrative of election fraud to inflame his supporters and direct them to the Capitol to prevent certification of the 2020 election and the peaceful transfer of power. I likewise conclude that Mr. Trump was aware of the likelihood for violence and at least initially supported its use, given he both encouraged it with incendiary rhetoric and took no timely action to stop it. The weight of the evidence makes clear that Mr. Trump was aware of the tinder laid by his multiple-month effort to delegitimize a Democratic election and then chose to light a match. I do not reach this conclusion lightly. Democracy is sacred, and the highest court of this state has repeatedly recognized that no right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which, as good citizens, we must live. I am mindful that no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I am also mindful, however, that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection. To nobody's surprise, Donald Trump threw a little temper tantrum over Maine's decision to give him the boot. But he did not just stop there, folks. He went on his social media site where he posted a link directing his followers to the Maine Secretary of State's official website, a website that lists her phone number and address. I wonder what Donald Trump possibly could have wanted to achieve by posting that. We're going to let you draw your own conclusions. But if past is prologue, the Maine Secretary of State could soon be on the receiving end of not just complaints from Trump loyalists, but threats, as we saw with the Colorado Supreme Court justices who received an onslaught of death threats following their ruling. Now, it is worth noting that this new ruling out of Maine and the ruling out of Colorado, that they are both still in legal limbo. The Colorado Republican Party has already done Trump a solid by appealing that state's ruling to the Supreme Court. And the former president has vowed to appeal this new ruling out of Maine. Meanwhile, Donald Trump did notch a win in the Democratic stronghold of California, where the Secretary of State ruled that Donald Trump can stay on California's GOP primary ballot. There are a lot of moving parts, but This one thing is clear, folks. This new ruling out of Maine, it proves that no matter how much the ex-president wants to wish it all away, the 14th Amendment is very much a clear and present danger to Donald Trump's efforts to return to power. And that is where we start with the aforementioned Maine Secretary of State, Shanna Bellows. Madam Secretary, I want to thank you so much for being here. And I actually want to start by asking you about something that I just mentioned in our setup. Are you and your team receiving any threats? And just not in the wake of your ruling, but specifically in the wake of the ex-president posting a link to your official website with your contact information?
First, thank you for having me. I deeply appreciate it. And I just want to share that my decision is about the rule of law and the Constitution. And that is my only consideration. And this is part of the process here in the state of Maine. And I hope everyone will be civil, will be respectful, and will follow the process and follow the law. You very much so. Just as you laid out in your decision, you went through great lengths to just explain your process. You use somber language in the decision and in your conversations last night and just now with me. And I'm just wondering, given all of the lengths that you've gone through, I know you take this very seriously, what the former president did yesterday. I mean, I can't infer what his reasoning was behind it, but do you feel like you are in any danger, and are you all receiving any threats given the post that he made? I'm not comfortable discussing my own personal security, and indeed my own security and safety is not a consideration in this matter. We are a country of laws, and our oath that we swear is to support the Constitution of the United States and the laws of our country. And so as we engage in this process, what is important is the meaning of the Constitution, the facts before us, and that interpretation. And there can be no other consideration. And I think that's really important, that this process is a legal process. The United States Constitution gives states the authority to administer elections. And states, in turn, can pass laws delegating that authority, which the Maine legislature has done to the Maine Secretary of State. And that is why Maine voters have the right to bring a challenge to any candidate's qualifications, and they did so. And we held a hearing on December 15th, and I made a decision because I was obligated to by the law and the oath that I took to the Constitution. And the next step is to the Superior Court, and then to the Maine Supreme Judicial Court, and then potentially the U.S. Supreme Judicial Court. That is our process. That is the rule of law. That is what we need to uphold and follow, no matter what.
And joining me now is Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. Secretary of State Griswold, thanks for joining us tonight. What is your reaction to this ruling in Maine disqualifying Trump from the ballot there?
Well, thanks for having me on. Good evening. I think it's a good thing that Secretary Bellows followed and sided with the Colorado Supreme Court's decision, which ultimately disqualifies Trump. Look, Trump engaged in an insurrection. He incited a violent group to try to stop the peaceful transfer of the presidency. And the Constitution clearly bars someone who swears to uphold the Constitution and then does those types of actions from serving again. So I think it's the right decision and also courageous because the atmosphere we're living in leads to a lot of threats and threats of violence. So you do have to have bravery to make the right decisions.
All right. So, honey, did you like that? Dump Trump?
I did, sure.
Dumped off of the ballot. So this is just the beginning. You know, so far, 2 states have eliminated him from the ballot. Of course, there's a lot of court action going on after that. So who knows how it's all going to play out. But I would like for you to weigh in. And also, our people that are online, anybody got anything to say about that? I'd love to hear it.
Well, you know what? It's amazing to me as you look at this process of what's going on through those that are trying to stand up for our democracy and stand up for what is right. You know,
Yes.
the bottom line is the number of women who are up front on this battle, and the number of black women who are there, which
Oh
makes you
yeah.
ask the question, well, where are the men? You know,
Well,
and but I mean that part to me is amazing, and the fact that the Constitution gives the states the right to handle their elections and all that, but then someone wants to argue, well, that part of the Constitution is okay, but this part that says that he can't run because he was involved in insurrection or gave comfort and aid to the insurrectionists and all that. We don't want to follow that part. We want to follow this part, but not that part. I don't see how you can do that. And the actual decision on this is going to go a long way, as to preserving this democracy and
yes.
this United States, which they claim is one nation under God.
I did want to kind of get your opinion of where do you think, well, do you think the Supreme Court is going to take, because the other thing, like you were saying, each state is different. So Colorado came at it through the courts, and the Colorado Supreme Court made that decision. In Maine, they have a different way of doing it. And as the Secretary of State said, she made a decision. Now it goes to the courts, maybe to the Maine Supreme Court. But at the bottom line, do you think that the Supreme Court is going to weigh in on this disqualification? I mean, and again, if you're under 35, you can't run for president. If you weren't born in the United States, you can't run for president. There's a lot of other things that disqualify you. But this one here, this participating in an insurrection or giving aid and comfort to an insurrection, that's a disqualifying factor.
It is. And your question about what I think the Supreme Court is going to do, I do think they'll end up weighing in on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which way they're going to go because some of the rulings that they make just make your head just explode,
It's like, what were they thinking?
It boggles my mind, some of the things they do. But
Uh-huh.
I think they're going to have to, because one of the things that a Supreme Court does is to try to make sure the law is uniform across the land. And you're going to have states, some states say yes, some states say no. And I don't think they're going to leave it at that. They could, but this is a Supreme Court that wants to keep their finger on the scale. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
I'm looking to see. Okay. Sister Michelle, I'll put your comment up on the screen. But you didn't weigh in on getting Trump dumped. At any rate, that's our Gap News.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, let's get down to this Christmas story. I'm trying to get people straight on the true Christmas story, and people should understand that I don't look at the Christmas story as just the birth of Christ, because that is not the reason why we sing.